pitch deck had taken me 11 months to build. Not 11 months of casual thinking or occasional weekend work. 11 months of 5 a.m. alarm clocks, skipped lunches, notebooks filled with market research I'd conducted myself, competitor analyses I'd run manually because I couldn't yet afford the premium tools. 11 months of refining a single idea until it had edges sharp enough to cut. The concept was a B2B logistics coordination platform specifically designed for mid-size regional distributors. Companies too large to manage routes manually but too small to justify enterprise-level software subscriptions. It was a gap I'd identified during 2 years working as an operations analyst at a freight company in Cincinnati. Every week I watched mid-level managers cobbling together solutions from 3 different software tools that didn't communicate with each other, losing hours to data entry that should have been automated, making routing decisions based on outdated information because their systems couldn't sync in real time. The inefficiency was staggering and completely unnecessary. I knew exactly how to fix it. My name is Claire Hartwell. I was 26 years old when I built that deck. I had a bachelor's degree in computer science, 2 years of directly relevant industry experience, a working prototype I'd built on nights and weekends using my own savings, and a list of 12 potential early adopter clients I'd cultivated through genuine relationship building over 18 months. I had a financial model that was conservative, defensible, and based on real numbers from real conversations with real purchasing managers. I had everything. What I didn't have was a family that understood what I'd built. My parents, Robert and Diane Hartwell, had spent 30 years running a modest hardware supply business in Columbus, Ohio. They were hardworking people who understood inventory and margins and the value of showing up on time. What they didn't understand was software or venture capital or intellectual property, or the particular brutality of the startup world. To them, a business idea was something you wrote on a napkin and then either did or didn't do. The 11 months of research, the prototype, the client pipeline, these things didn't translate into their framework of what effort looked like. My brother Marcus was 31, married with a toddler, and had spent the previous 4 years bouncing between sales jobs with increasing desperation. He was charismatic in the way that works at parties and fails in quarterly reviews. He had tried and abandoned 3 business ideas in 5 years, each one lasting long enough to generate family excitement before dissolving quietly when the actual work began. My parents loved Marcus the way parents sometimes love the child who needs them most. Urgently, protectively, and with a blind spot the size of a solar system. I made the mistake of sharing my pitch deck at a family dinner in March. I hadn't intended to present it formally. My parents had asked how my computer project was going and I'd opened my laptop to show them the executive summary. 2 pages, clean design, clear value proposition. I thought it might help them understand why I'd been so unavailable for family events over the past year. I thought it might make them proud. My mother leaned in and read carefully. My father asked 3 questions, all sensible. Marcus sat across the table scrolling his phone, occasionally glancing up with the mild interest of someone watching a television channel he hadn't chosen. 2 weeks later, I arrived at Sunday dinner to find the energy in the room slightly wrong. My mother was busy in the kitchen longer than necessary. My father sat in his chair with the particular stillness of a man who has prepared remarks. Marcus wasn't there, which was unusual. His wife, Brittany, had apparently taken their son to her mother's for the weekend. My father waited until I'd sat down and poured my water before he said it. We showed Marcus your pitch deck. For seconds of silence. We thought it might help him find direction, my mother added from the kitchen doorway, her voice carrying the careful brightness of someone who has rehearsed this. He's been struggling, Claire. You know how he's been struggling. He needs a head start, my father continued. You're creative, you'll think of something else. These ideas come naturally to you. I looked at my father, then at my mother, then at the table. He has a family to support, my father said. This was apparently the conclusion of the argument. The child with a family outranked the child without one. My 11 months of work was a resource to be redistributed based on need, the same way my mother used to give Marcus the larger piece of cake because he'd ask for it louder. I said nothing. I picked up my fork. I ate dinner. I answered questions about my week in complete sentences. I helped clear the table. I drove home. I did not cry, which surprised me. What I felt instead was something colder and more clarifying than grief. It was the particular sensation of understanding something completely for the first time. Not learning it because some part of me had always known, but finally, undeniably understanding it. My parents did not see me as a person with a future worth protecting. They saw me as a resource with renewable capacity. Marcus had a need. I had something. The transfer was logical to them. I sat in my apartment that night and made two decisions. The first, I would never show my family anything important again. The second, I would build the company anyway. Better. Smarter. Without them. The first thing I did was call an intellectual property attorney. Her name was Sandra Okonkwo, a partner at a small but respected firm in Cincinnati, and she had been recommended to me by a former colleague who'd navigated a similar situation years earlier. I explained what had happened in plain terms. Sandra listened without interrupting, asked 4 precise questions, and then told me what I needed to hear. The pitch deck itself was copyrighted the moment I created it. Marcus couldn't legally use my specific materials, but the underlying concept, logistics coordination software for mid-sized distributors, was not protectable as an idea. What was protectable was specific implementation. The technical architecture, the particular algorithms I'd developed for route optimization, the interface methodology I'd designed. File provisional patents on everything technical before he launches, Sandra said. Every specific process, every novel method. If your prototype works the way you've described, there's significant protectable IP here. File now and file broadly. I used $6,200 from my savings account, money I'd been accumulating for 18 months, and filed 11 provisional patent applications over the following 6 weeks. I documented everything. Dates, versions, commit logs from my code repository, email chains with potential clients, the original prototype's codebase with timestamps. Sandra built me a paper trail that would have been difficult and expensive to challenge. Meanwhile, Marcus launched. My parents gave him $85,000. I found this out not from them but from my cousin Dana, who mentioned it at a birthday party with the casual assumption that I already knew. Your parents really came through for him, she said warmly. That's so great that you were willing to share your idea. I smiled and said something non-committal and spent the drive home recalibrating everything I thought I knew about my own capacity for anger. Marcus called his company RouteSync. He hired a development team in Eastern Europe to build the software. He gave himself the title of CEO and began attending networking events in Columbus with the confidence of a man who has done something. He told the story of the idea as his own. Not a modified version, not a story about being inspired by his sister, but a clean first-person narrative in which the gap in the market had occurred to him personally one day while thinking about logistics. He gave interviews to 2 local business publications. He posted on LinkedIn about entrepreneurship and the courage it takes to bet on yourself. My parents sent me the links. I read them carefully. I noted every technical claim he made, every description of the product's functionality, and compared them against my patent filings. Marcus's team had built something using my original architecture, but they'd simplified it significantly, stripped out the features that were most technically complex, which happened to be the features covered by my strongest patent applications. Whether this was deliberate or simply a result of working with developers who didn't fully understand what they were building, I couldn't say. But the result was that Marcus had launched a product that was related to my concept but legally distinct from my protected implementations. He had taken my idea. He had not taken what made it actually good. I quit my job in August of that year. I had enough savings for 14 months of runway if I was disciplined. I moved to a smaller apartment. I cooked at home. I canceled every subscription I didn't need. I worked 16 hours a day, not out of panic but out of the particular focus that arrives when you have nothing left to hedge. I rebuilt my prototype from scratch, incorporating everything I'd learned from 2 more years of industry experience. I made it faster, more intuitive, more deeply integrated with the supply chain management systems that regional distributors were already using. I built features Marcus's version couldn't touch. In February, 10 months after I'd quit my job, I signed my first paying client, a regional food distributor in Kentucky with 42 trucks and a logistics manager named Gerald who had been using 3 separate software tools and a whiteboard to coordinate his fleet. Gerald paid me $2,400 a month. I called Sandra from the parking lot of Gerald's facility and said, "It's working," and she said, "I know," because she had believed this before I had. By the end of that year I had 7 clients and $198,000 in annual recurring revenue. I did not tell my family. I attended Christmas dinner and answered questions about my freelance work, in vague, accurate terms. Marcus talked about RouteSync for 40 minutes. Client growth projections, a partnership conversation he was having with a regional trucking association, his plans to raise a Series A. My parents listened with the focused attention they had never once given my prototype. I ate my mother's pot roast and refilled my water glass and thought about Gerald, who had referred me to 2 of his industry contacts that month without being asked. I raised my seed round in the spring of the following year. $1.8 million from a Cincinnati-based venture firm whose managing partner, a sharp and direct woman named Patricia Ellison, had found me through a mutual contact in the logistics industry. Patricia had done her due diligence thoroughly. She'd spoken to my clients, reviewed my patent portfolio, and analyzed the competitive landscape, including RouteSync. "Your brother's company is in the same space," she said during our third meeting without particular drama. "It is," I said. "His product is significantly weaker." "I know." Patricia nodded once and moved to the term sheet. I named my company Lattice Logistics. We closed the seed round in April and I hired my first 2 full-time employees. A senior developer named James who had left a larger firm because he wanted to build something real, and an account manager named Priya who had spent 6 years in freight and understood our clients in ways I couldn't teach from a manual. We moved into a small office in Cincinnati's startup corridor. I put nothing on social media. I did not give interviews to local business publications. I did not tell my parents. I just built. The next 3 years were the strangest of my life because I was living 2 of them simultaneously. In the version my family saw, I was doing fine. Stable, self-sufficient, probably a little too focused on work, not yet married, not yet a parent, therefore not yet fully real in the way Marcus was real. I came to family events 4 or 5 times a year. I brought wine and asked about my nephew and listened to RouteSync updates with an expression I had carefully practiced in the mirror until it looked exactly like polite interest. In the version my family didn't see, Lattice Logistics was growing at a pace that frightened and exhilarated me in equal measure. We closed our Series A, $8.4 million, 14 months after the seed round. Patricia led the round again and brought in 2 additional investors whose names I recognized from the logistics tech coverage I'd been reading since before I quit my day job. We used the capital to build out our enterprise tier, which allowed us to serve larger distributors without abandoning the mid-market clients who had validated us from the beginning. James hired 4 more developers. Priya built a sales function that generated $2.1 million in new annual recurring revenue in its first full year of operation. Marcus, from what I could observe through family conversation and occasional LinkedIn monitoring, was struggling. RouteSync had raised a modest angel round, $340,000. From family connections and a few Columbus area small business owners who knew my parents. The product had attracted a small client base, perhaps 30 or 40 companies, but growth had stalled. The fundamental weakness in the product, the oversimplification that had kept it outside my patent claims but also made it genuinely less useful than alternatives, was catching up with Marcus in the marketplace. His clients weren't expanding their contracts. His churn rate, based on what I could infer from his LinkedIn activity and the absence of growth announcements, was significant. My mother mentioned once carefully that Marcus was going through a challenging period with the business. My father said that the market was difficult right now for startups. I nodded and said that was true, the market was difficult, and I topped off my wine. In year 3, Lattice crossed $12 million in annual recurring revenue. In year 3, we also received our first acquisition approach. A larger logistics software company that had been watching our growth and wanted to understand our patent portfolio. Patricia and I met with their business development team, listened politely, and declined. We weren't ready to sell, and more importantly, we weren't done yet. James came into my office the morning after that meeting and said, "Are we really not selling?" And I said, "Not yet." And he nodded slowly and went back to his desk, and I could tell he was genuinely relieved. I raised a Series B of $22 million in the spring of year 4. By that point we had 94 clients, 31 employees, and a product that 3 separate industry analysts had identified as the technical leader in our category. Our net revenue retention rate, the metric that measures whether existing clients are spending more over time, was 118%, which meant our clients weren't just staying, they were growing with us. I was 31 years old. At Christmas that year, Marcus talked about pivoting RouteSync toward a consulting model. My father said this sounded promising. My mother served dessert. I helped wash dishes and drove home in the dark and sat in my car in the parking garage for a few minutes before going upstairs. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me most. The anger had metabolized somewhere in year 2 into something more neutral and more sustaining. A kind of clear-eyed forward motion that didn't require any particular feeling about my family to continue. I had stopped needing them to understand what I'd built. I had stopped needing anything from them at all. That, more than the revenue or the patents or the investor names, was the thing I was most proud of. I was in a board meeting when the alert came through. Patricia had set up a competitive monitoring service early in our history that tracked public filings, press mentions and regulatory activity for a list of companies in our space. RouteSync had been on that list since day one. Not because I was obsessed with Marcus, but because Patricia insisted on knowing what every competitor was doing and Marcus was technically a competitor. The alert appeared on my phone at 11:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. RouteSync LC. Articles of Dissolution filed Franklin County, Ohio. Effective date, October 15th. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the conference table and returned my attention to the board presentation. Patricia glanced at me once with a slight raise of her eyebrows. I gave the smallest possible nod. He understood. She returned to the slide on her screen. We finished the meeting at 12:45. I walked to my office, closed the door and sat for a moment with the news that Marcus's company, built on my idea, funded with my family's belief in him, sustained for 4 years by a story he'd been telling publicly as his own, had officially ceased to exist. I thought I might feel something dramatic. Vindication, perhaps, or grief, or the complex mixture of both that the situation seemed to warrant. What I felt instead was something quieter and harder to name. Not satisfaction. Not sadness. Something more like the feeling of finishing a very long book. The particular completeness of an ending that has been building for a long time. I called Sandra. I saw, she said before I could speak. For years, I said. Yes, she said. How are you? I'm okay, I said. And I went back to work. We had a product release scheduled for Thursday. A new integration with a major supply chain management platform that we'd been building for 6 months. And there were 17 items on my pre-launch checklist that needed my attention. I worked until 8 p.m., ordered Thai food, ate at my desk and went home. I did not call my parents. I didn't need to. I knew the call was coming. My phone rang at 8:07 a.m. I was on my second coffee reviewing Thursday's release notes, when my father's name appeared on the screen. I looked at it for 3 full rings. Then I answered. Claire. His voice was different from any version of it I'd heard in 31 years. The particular confidence my father carried, the settled authority of a man who has always known what was right, was absent. What remained was smaller and older. Do you have a minute? I have a few minutes, I said. Good morning, Dad. Pause. I could hear him gathering himself on the other end. You've heard about Marcus. I heard, I said. It's been very hard on him. On Brittany. The whole family has been. It's been a difficult week. Another pause. Claire, he needs to find something new. He's been talking to some people about his next step and we, your mother and I, we thought that with your connections now, your company, maybe there was something you could. What are you asking, Dad? The directness landed. I heard him exhale. We were hoping you might consider Marcus for an investor conversation. Or a role of some kind. He has experience now, 4 years running a company, sales background, he understands the space. You're in the same industry. It seems like a natural. Dad, I said. Fit, and we know that the history between you two isn't simple, but family is family and Marcus has a son to think about and Brittany has been. Dad, I said again more quietly. He stopped. I need you to hear me, I said. Not as your daughter who will find a way to make this okay. Just hear what I'm saying. A long silence. The pitch deck you gave Marcus was 11 months of my work. The idea he built his company on was mine. For 4 years he told journalists and investors and LinkedIn followers that concept was his. He never corrected that. Not once. You and Mom never called to apologize. Not once. I kept my voice even, not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I had spent 4 years deciding exactly what I would say if this moment arrived. I don't hold what happened against you in the way I used to. I genuinely don't. But I need you to understand something clearly. I did not succeed in spite of what you did. I succeeded because of what I am, which has nothing to do with what you gave Marcus or didn't give me. Lattice Logistics is mine. Every client, every patent, every dollar of it. I built it. My father was quiet for a long time. I know, he said finally. Just that. His voice was very low. Marcus is a capable person, I continued. He needs to find his own direction. But I can't be his direction, Dad. That's not fair to him and it's not something I'm willing to do. Claire. I'm not finished. I hadn't planned to say more, but something else needed to be said, and the moment felt like the only one it would fit. I'm not angry. I want you to know that. What happened 4 years ago hurt me in a way I'm not sure you fully understand, and I spent a lot of time being angry about it. But I'm not anymore. I have a company I'm proud of and a team I love and work that matters to me. I have everything I built and no one can take that from me because I built it the right way. I paused. I hope Marcus finds something. I genuinely do. But it won't be through me. That's my final answer. Silence. "Oui," my father said. His voice cracked slightly on the single syllable. "I'll call Mom on Sunday," I said. "We can talk about something else." I ended the call and set my phone on my desk and looked out the window at the Cincinnati skyline for a moment. Then I picked up my pen and returned to the release notes. Thursday's launch needed to be perfect. The product release on Thursday went flawlessly. The new integration with the supply chain management platform opened us to a category of client we hadn't been able to serve before. Larger regional distributors who were locked into that specific ecosystem. Within 3 weeks of launch, Priya's team had signed 4 enterprise contracts totaling $1.4 million in new annual recurring revenue. James sent me a Slack message that said only, "We did it," in capital letters, which from James, who communicated almost entirely in lowercase, felt like a standing ovation. I gave the team the following Friday afternoon off and took them to dinner at a restaurant downtown where we filled 2 long tables and stayed until the kitchen closed. I gave a short speech that I'd written on a notepad that afternoon and then immediately lost, so I gave a different one from memory that I think was better. Lattice Logistics crossed $140 million in total valuation, confirmed by our Series B post-money calculation and subsequent third-party assessment, in the 4th quarter of that year. Patricia sent me a bottle of champagne with a card that said, "You always knew it would work." That's the rarest thing. Kept the card. I gave the champagne to Priya, who had more people to celebrate with. Marcus, from what I understood through family updates I received and didn't seek out, spent the months after RouteSync's dissolution consulting for small businesses in Columbus, helping them with sales strategy, which was genuinely where his talents had always lived. He was not a builder. He had never been a builder. The cruelty of what my parents had done to both of us, I came to understand, wasn't only what they'd taken from me. It was what they'd set Marcus up to carry. An idea that was never his in a technical space that was never his strength, with the full weight of the family's belief that he would succeed because he deserved to, not because he was suited to. He had been failed by their belief in him just as I had been failed by their disbelief in me. I didn't say this to my parents. Some understandings are complete enough in yourself. My mother called on the Sunday I'd promised and we talked for 40 minutes about my nephew's school and a renovation she was considering for the kitchen and a book she'd read that she thought I might like. She did not mention Marcus's company or the phone call with my father. Before she hung up she said, quietly and without ceremony, "I'm proud of you, Claire." Just that, with no elaboration or apology attached. I said, "Thank you, Mom." I meant it. Not because it erased anything. Not because those 4 words covered 11 months of pitch deck or 4 years of silence or a family dinner where my work was redistributed like a side dish. They didn't cover any of it. But they were true and they were hers, and I was 31 years old and I had built something real and my mother was proud of me. That was enough. Not everything. But enough. Sandra called that same week to let me know that 2 of our patent applications had moved to final approval. The route optimization algorithm and the dynamic load balancing methodology, the 2 strongest pieces of the portfolio, the ones that would matter most as the industry continued to develop. "Congratulations," she said. "Those are going to be worth protecting." "I know," I said. "That's why we filed them first." James knocked on my office door and opened it 6 inches. "The Louisville client wants a demo next week," he said. "I think they're ready to close." I said, "Schedule it," and he nodded and closed the door. I turned back to my screen where the new client dashboard was open, showing 37 active enterprise accounts across 14 states, each one a name I could attach to a conversation, a handshake, a problem I'd understood better than anyone else in the market because I had lived inside that problem for years before I ever tried to solve it. 94 clients. 31 employees. 11 patents. 1 pitch deck. 11 months. A family dinner in March. I thought about the version of myself who had sat at that table in silence, who had eaten the pot roast and helped clear the dishes and driven home and made 2 decisions in a quiet apartment. I thought about what she had believed was possible and how completely, methodically, she had turned out to be right. I said nothing. I said aloud to no one. Then I went back to work,